The Brinks Building, North End, Boston, January 17, 1950, 7:10 p.m. A brown 1949 Ford pickup truck pulls up to the back loading dock of a 4-story red brick building at 165 Prince Street. 11 men step out, each in a matching navy peacoat, each in a Captain Marvel mask, papier-mâché, smiling, $2 each at the Woolworths down the street. They have, between them, 5 separate copies of every key in the building. None of those keys was made by the Brinks Company. For the next 20 minutes, 10 of the 11, the 11th remains at the wheel of the truck, removed from the Brinks vault on the second floor. $2,775,395 in United States cash. By midnight, the FBI is calling it the largest single-armed robbery in the history of the United States. This is Anthony Fats Pino, 43. Born in Sicily, raised in Boston's North End, 220 pounds, asthmatic, terrified of guns. Across the previous 18 months, he has walked into the Brinks building after hours more than 20 times. He has not left a single fingerprint. He has had every lock in the building removed, copied, and replaced before the morning shift could notice. He has not, in those 18 months, fired a weapon. So how does a Sicilian immigrant with no formal education, no military training, and no skill with a firearm pull off what J. Edgar Hoover will call the crime of the century? And what was inside those 11 Halloween masks in those 18 months of preparation that the largest non-federal investigation in FBI history will, for the next 6 years, fail to crack? The Brinks Company, founded in Chicago in 1859, was by 1950 the largest armored car operator in the United States. Its primary contract was the nightly transport of U.S. currency between Federal Reserve banks and commercial banks in every major American city. In 1950, 80% of American transactions were still settled in cash. The Brinks Company moved, on an average weeknight, more physical money than any private corporation on earth. Its Boston facility at 165 Prince Street in the North End had been a Brinks site since 1926. 4 stories, red brick. The vault was on the second floor. The counting room was on the first. The vault had 18-inch steel walls, a time lock, and 2 combination dials. The 5 overnight guards were ex-policemen, screened by Pinkerton. The Brinks Company, by January 1950, had not suffered a successful robbery in 91 years of corporate operation. J. Edgar Hoover, in a 1948 internal FBI memorandum declassified in 1996, the Brinks Company holds the most secure non-federal cash facility in the United States. Anyone considering robbery of such a facility would be insane. The American banking system in 1950 ran on cash. The Brinks Company moved the cash. The Brinks Company was, by industry consensus, impossible to rob. That was the consensus. That was the thesis. That was the thesis Anthony Pino had spent the previous 18 months disassembling, one wax key impression at a time. Anthony Pino was born in 1907 in Bagheria, a fishing town on the coast of Sicily, 8 miles east of Palermo. His father, Salvatore, was a day laborer in the citrus groves. His mother, Anna, kept the house. In 1910, the family sailed for Boston. They settled in a 3rd-floor walk-up on Hanover Street, in the heart of the city's Sicilian district, the North End. Salvatore took a position pulling a fruit cart at Faneuil Hall. He worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, for between 50 cents and $1 an hour. Anthony's first arrest came at 12. He had stolen 3 apples from his father's own cart. The local patrolman, who knew the family, walked him home by the collar. He left school at 14. He worked beside his father at the cart until he was 17. In 1928, at the age of 21, Anthony Pino went into the alcohol business. Prohibition had been the law of the land for 8 years. He smuggled Canadian whiskey from the New Brunswick border down through Maine. He was, by 1931, running approximately 6 trucks a week into Boston warehouses. It was on one of those runs, in the autumn of 1929, that he met a Dorchester liquor store owner named Joseph Big Joe McGinnis. The partnership that would, 21 years later, conduct the crime of the century began in the back room of a roadhouse outside Saco, Maine. In 1935, the federal government caught up with him. He was sentenced to 4 years at the federal penitentiary at Atlanta for interstate smuggling. In federal prison, Anthony Pino read books. Books on criminology, on the psychology of eyewitness testimony, on the logistics of armored car transport. He came home to Boston in 1939 at the age of 32 with a small, specific, mechanical idea about how a sufficiently disciplined group of men could rob the Brinks company without firing a single shot. Pino, by Specs O'Keefe's later memoir of 1971, Why Shoot When You Can Pick a Lock? In 1940, he married a North End woman named Vivian. They had no children. They rented a $40 a month walk-up apartment on Mount Vernon Street. Pino was, by the standards of his neighborhood, modest, polite, asthmatic, and 5 feet 8 inches tall. His mother Anna died of pneumonia in February 1947. She was buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. She did not, in her lifetime, know what her son was planning. The ex-bootlegger had become, by some private re-engineering of his own intellect across 4 years in a federal prison cell, the first man in the history of the United States to consider organized robbery as a problem of engineering rather than violence. By the autumn of 1948, Anthony Pino had assembled the 11 men who would, 14 months later, walk into the Brinks building. Joseph Big Joe McGinnis, co-mastermind, owner of a liquor store on Blue Hill Avenue, money handler. Joseph Specs O'Keefe, 41, South Boston Irish, glasses, quiet. Pino's closest friend since 1942, the inside operator, the man Pino trusted with his life, Stanley Gus Gusiora, O'Keefe's partner, Adolph Jazz Maffey, driver and money handler, Vincent Costa, Pino's brother-in-law, Henry Baker, Michael Geegan, Thomas Richardson, James Faherty, Sandy Richardson, lookouts and loaders. 11 men, each recruited for one specific skill. Profit share verbally signed in McGinnis's liquor store. 11 equal cuts of an expected $3 million take. The expected per-person share in 1949 dollars was approximately $220,000. $2.5 million per man in 2026 currency. In the back room of the liquor store on a Sunday afternoon in October 1948, Pino made the rule that would, in the end, become the difference between the crime of the century and any other gangster's holdup of the previous 50 years. Pino, as recorded in O'Keefe's 1971 memoir, "If anyone fires a gun, the whole operation is over. We're not gangsters, we're businessmen." 11 men. No guns, no threats, no raised voices. In the year 1948, the height of the Tommy gun era of American organized crime, when every newspaper photograph of every major heist showed the same image of automatic weapons in the hands of men in fedoras, Anthony Pino had organized the first 11-man crew in American criminal history that would carry out a $180 million operation without a single firearm. The reconnaissance began in January 1948. Pino had identified, through 4 months of patient observation, the quietest window in the Brinks nightly schedule. Between 2:15 and 3:06 in the morning, when the overnight guards changed shift in the second-floor counting room. In that window, the rear loading dock was unmanned for approximately 51 minutes. Across the next 2 years, Pino, McGinnis, O'Keefe, and Gusiora walked into the Brinks building through that loading dock on 24 separate occasions. Each visit had one objective: remove one lock from one door, take one wax impression, return the lock to its frame before morning shift. The locksmith was a man named Carlton O'Brien, a friend of Pino's since the 1930s. O'Brien kept silent for the rest of his life and was never charged. By the autumn of 1949, the Pino crew possessed 5 complete sets of every key in the Brinks building. None had been issued by the Brinks company. The remainder of the equipment was assembled across the autumn of 1949 inside the basement of McGinnis's liquor store. 11 identical navy blue peacoats purchased from a Navy surplus outlet in Charlestown. 11 identical gray caps. A 30-foot rope ladder. 11 canvas money sacks, pre-marked with chalk for vault location. The vehicle was a 1949 Ford F1 pickup truck, purchased privately for $1,200 cash and repainted brown. The masks were purchased 2 days before the heist at the Woolworth's department store on Hanover Street. 11 Captain Marvel masks, papier-mâché, smiling, $2 each. Total cost, $22. By the morning of January 17, 1950, Anthony Pino knew the Brinks building on Prince Street better than the chief executive of the Brinks company itself. 7:08 p.m., January 17, 1950. The brown Ford pickup parks at the rear loading dock of 165 Prince Street. Anthony Pino remains in the driver's seat. 10 men step out into the cold North End street. Each is wearing a navy peacoat. Each is wearing a gray cap. Each is wearing a smiling cardboard Captain Marvel mask. The first key turns. The rear service door opens. The 10 men walk in. Inside the first floor counting room, 5 Brinks employees are checking the day's deposits. They look up. They see, walking towards them in absolute silence, 10 identical men in identical clothes, wearing identical smiling faces. No one says a word. The Brinks employees are placed face down on the floor. Their wrists are bound with rope. Strips of their own clothing are tied across their eyes. By 7:15, the vault is open. The time lock cycle has been calculated to the minute from 18 months of observation. By 7:18, the cash is moving. Across the next 10 minutes, the 10 men carry 1,200 pounds of currency in 4 trips from the vault to the truck, 270 pounds per man per trip. At 7:28, the last sack reaches the truck. The rope used to bind the employees is gathered up and removed to leave no DNA, no fibers, no thread. At 7:30, the Ford pulls away. Total time inside the building, 20 minutes. Total cash removed, $2,775,395.12. In 2026 dollars, approximately $36 million. At 11:38 p.m., J. Edgar Hoover is woken at his home in Washington. 12 minutes later, he is on the line to the FBI's Boston field office. Hoover, in his transmitted instruction to Special Agent in Charge Edward Powers, "This is not ordinary crime. This is the crime of the century. I want every leading hoodlum in New England questioned within 72 hours." Anthony Pino had moved. In 20 minutes, without firing a single shot or raising a single voice, the largest single sum of cash ever removed from a private American facility in the history of the United States. The morning after the heist, Pino made the second rule that would define the operation. No money was to be spent by anyone for any reason. The cash in the Brinks vault had been newly issued. The serial numbers ran in long consecutive blocks. A single bill spent at a Boston tobacconist could, in the hands of any competent FBI accountant, be traced back to the Brinks shipment within 48 hours. The 11 men received $5,000 each in untraceable older bills, drawn from McGinnis's bootlegging cash on hand, as expense money. The remaining $2.5 million went into hiding. It went into the walls of Adolph Matthey's wife's house in Roxbury, into the basement of McGinnis's liquor store, into a concealed cavity at the back of a mausoleum in a cemetery in the North End, into a forgotten boiler room beneath an abandoned brewery in East Boston. By the spring of 1953, much of the cash had begun to mold. Some of it, by O'Keefe's later admission, had been chewed by mice. The FBI's response, under Hoover's direct supervision, became the largest non-federal criminal investigation in the agency's history. $29 million in budget, 5,000 interviews. Every leading hoodlum in the 6 New England states questioned within 72 hours. Then again at 6 months. Then again at 12. Hoover's first theory was that the operation had been organized by the communist underground. Soviet-funded, an attack on the American banking system. The crime of the century, he believed, could not be the work of ordinary American criminals. On March 14, 1950, 8 weeks after the robbery, Hoover launched the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives list, partly as a public relations response to the Brinks case. For the next 5 years, the list produced arrest after arrest. None of those arrests was Anthony Pino. 11 men, 6 years. Not a single one of them spoke. Not at a bar, not to a girlfriend, not on a tapped telephone, not in a confessional booth. The largest cash investigation in American FBI history, conducted at a cost greater than the heist itself, produced 0 leads on Anthony Pino. By the late autumn of 1955, the case was within 60 days of closure under the Massachusetts 6-year statute of limitations. In June 1954, Specs O'Keefe was arrested in central Pennsylvania for a separate, unrelated armed burglary, sentenced to 4 years. From his cell, O'Keefe began writing letters to McGinnis. He wanted his $100,000 share of the Brinks money, now, to pay for top-shelf legal counsel. McGinnis refused. O'Keefe, in prison, by his analysis, was a security risk who would, if returned to the streets with money in his pocket, eventually talk. On June 16, 1954, a Brooklyn-based contract killer named Elmer "Trigger" Burke was hired by McGinnis for $25,000. Burke flew to Boston. He waited outside an apartment building on Newland Street where O'Keefe, on furlough, was visiting his sister. At 9:10 in the evening, O'Keefe walked out the front door. Burke opened fire with a Thompson submachine gun, 30 rounds. O'Keefe was hit in the right arm and the chest. He survived. 17 days in Boston City Hospital. O'Keefe, by his own later account in his 1971 memoir, "That was when I knew. My own crew wanted me dead. Not the FBI, not the cops. My own crew." Trigger Burke was arrested in 1955 on an unrelated New York homicide. He was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing on January 9, 1958. 6 years of perfect silence, held by 11 men through 5,000 FBI interviews, $29 million of investigation, and the personal supervision of J. Edgar Hoover, was broken, not by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but by an internal disagreement over a single $100,000 share. On January 6, 1956, Specs O'Keefe was paroled, 28 months early, from the Pennsylvania State Correctional Facility. The terms of the parole had been negotiated 3 weeks earlier between O'Keefe's attorney and the Boston field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. On January 11, 1956, 11 o'clock in the morning, O'Keefe walked into that field office at 1 Court Street and asked to speak with Special Agent in Charge Edward Powers. O'Keefe, as recorded in Powers' contemporaneous case file notes, "I want them as much as you do." The confession ran to 60 single-spaced typewritten pages. O'Keefe named every man on the team. He described the routes, the keys, the locksmith, the masks, the truck, the rope, the cash. He named every location where Brink's money had been hidden across the previous 6 years. At 4 p.m. the following afternoon, January 12, 1956, a federal grand jury in Boston returned sealed indictments against the 8 surviving members of the Pino crew. Anthony Pino was arrested in his apartment on Mount Vernon Street that evening. He was finishing supper. Vivian was washing the dishes. He did not attempt to run. He did not, by the booking officer's report, speak a single word during processing. At midnight on January 17, 1956, exactly 6 years to the day after the heist, the Massachusetts statute of limitations on the Brinks robbery expired. The indictments had been filed 5 days too early. The federal trial began in October 1956. 8 defendants. Specs O'Keefe, cooperating witness, immunity granted, testifying against every man he had ever robbed beside. The verdict came in on January 9, 1957. Guilty, all 8. Pino and McGinnis received life sentences. The remaining 6 received between 20 and 40 years. Pino, at sentencing, by the contemporaneous reporting of the Boston Globe, nothing. He nodded once at the judge. He did not speak. 18 months of preparation, 20 minutes of execution, 6 years of perfect silence. All of it undone by 30 bullets fired outside a Newland Street apartment by a man Anthony Pino's own partner had hired. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had spent $29 million and 6 years searching for the men who had robbed the Brinks company. They were brought down, in the end, for $25,000, paid to the wrong hitman. Anthony "Fats" Pino died on October 27, 1973, at the Federal Medical Center in Springfield, Missouri, of a heart attack at the age of 66. He had been in federal custody for 16 years. He is buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts, 50 yards from his mother, Anna. The headstone reads, in full, Anthony S. Pino, 1907 to 1973. It does not mention the crime of the century. His wife Vivian outlived him by 8 years. She died in 1981 in the same Mount Vernon Street apartment they had rented together since 1940. She had no children. She is buried beside him. Joseph McGinnis died of cancer at the federal prison in Springfield in 1966. Specs O'Keefe was released from federal cooperation custody in 1960. He moved to Los Angeles. For the last decade of his life, he worked as a private chauffeur for the American film actor Cary Grant. He died of natural causes in San Francisco on March 9, 1976, at the age of 67. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. In 1978, William Friedkin, director of The French Connection and The Exorcist, released a feature film about the heist titled The Brinks Job. Peter Falk played Anthony Pino. The film was shot, with the permission of the Brinks Company, inside the original Prince Street building. The Prince Street building was demolished in 1986. A small bronze plaque installed in 2000 marks the spot. Of the $2,775,000 originally taken, only $92,000 was ever recovered. The remaining $2.5 million, adjusted for inflation, approximately $33 million in 2026, has never been found. Treasure hunters still search the basements and cemeteries of Boston's North End. He did not fire a single shot. He did not raise his voice. He did not break a single window. He just walked in through the door 20 times, until the largest cash facility in the United States opened its own vault for him.